Welcome to Arranging and Cataloguing Your Archive Collections, a training session developed by the Community Archives Skills Support and Sustainability Project, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. I'm Laura McCourt, Community Archives Project Manager.
And I'm Robin Sampson, the Community Archivist for the project. By the end of this session, we are anticipating that you will understand how archives should be arranged according to the principles of provenance and original order, and you'll learn how to fill in a catalogue entry with the required information so that it meets archival standards and can be easily shared. Once you have taken in an archive collection, the next step is to organise and describe it in a way that makes it easy for you to manage and to make it accessible for researchers. This process is known as arrangement. By arrangement, we don't mean physical arrangement, where things are actually kept, but intellectual arrangement, which is how the collection's catalogue is set up. Arrangement ensures you know and record the background to the collection, also known as its context, what the collection contains, how much material there is in the collection, and how the items in the collection relate to each other. There are two key principles of arrangement, which are provenance and original order. Provenance and original order protect the contents, structure, and background of the collection. They also mean you can prove the collection is authentic and reliable documentary evidence. It is not fake. Provenance tells us where the collection came from, why it was created, and how it was used. Original order tells us how the collection's creators arranged it. Provenance relates to the creator of a record and its ongoing history of ownership. Who has kept or looked after the records in the meantime until it has ended up in your custody? Archivists try to avoid putting items together in the catalogue which are from different sources. Archival catalogues usually include a description of the provenance of the collection. Think of it like having two different jigsaw puzzles. If you mix the two sets of pieces together and decided to rearrange them by colour, that wouldn't be useful to anyone who was hoping to complete one of the jigsaws. In the example shown here, you would not want to mix up the archive collections of the Renningham Women's Institute and the Bracken Ash Women's Institute, as although they are both collections relating to the WI, the records were created by separate branches. If you mix them together, they would lose their unique provenance. It would be very confusing for researchers who are only interested in researching one group to find records of the other mixed in with it. It may give a false impression of how the two groups were organised. Sometimes you might find that there is no obvious provenance in a collection, so you have no idea who created it, where it came from, or how it was passed on to your community archive. We'll cover what to do in that situation shortly. Original order is the order in which the records were kept and organised by their creator. The principle of original order requires that records are documented in this order if at all possible. You need to look at the records for clues about what they are and how they were arranged. For example, original titles, reference numbers, or dates. You might think about arranging this collection by the type of material it contains: photographs, correspondence, oral history interviews, and so on. But the Mr. Topley file contains photographs and correspondence. If you remove Mr. Topley's photographs from this file and put them in a series labelled photographs, you would lose any connection between Mr. Topley's photographs and his related letters. A researcher may not then realise the importance of this connection and may not get a full picture during their research. Or you might think about arranging this collection by subject matter. For example, you put all the photographs of St Andrew's Church into one file labelled St Andrew's Church. But then you would cover up the fact that some of these photographs were taken by Helen and some were taken by John. This could be relevant. They could have been taken at a different time, cover different themes, or show the different style of the photographer. If you mix them together, this information would be lost. Or you could decide to put all of the information about Binham Priory together into one series called Binham Priory Documents. But then you would have the photographs of Binham Priory in the same place as the letters of Mrs. Hughes, who wrote them much earlier and did not take the photographs. This could give the researcher a false impression that Mrs. Hughes took the photographs. If you attempt to follow the idea of original order, you get a stronger sense of how the collection was originally brought together and an insight into the thought process and working methods of the collection's creator. Sometimes it is not possible to determine a collection's provenance or original order, particularly with community archives that take in items from many different sources. It could have come to you in a rubbish bag with everything jumbled up. In cases such as this, it may be easy to arrange the catalogue of the collection by its subjects or the functions it describes. This is sometimes called functional analysis. For example, a collection of photographs with no obvious provenance or original order could be arranged by the types or locations of buildings depicted in them, or by the profession they document, for example, farming, fishing, brewing, or thatching. Functional analysis should only be attempted as a last resort. You should only do it if you cannot determine the provenance and original order of a collection. Archive collections are not catalogued in lists, but rather in levels of description, starting with the collection level. The collection level describes the whole of a particular collection, including what it is, who created or used it, what dates it covers, how big it is, and so on. Next, you have series level. Series level describes groupings of related records or types of records within a collection. For example, you could have a series comprising local history research and a series comprising photographs of parish buildings. Next, you have file level. File level describes a specific group of documents within a series that were kept, created, or used for a specific purpose. For example, you could have a file of newspaper cuttings documenting a local festival. And lastly, you have item level. This could be an individual piece of a file, such as a photograph, a map, a single press cutting, or a letter. You don't always have to catalogue down to this level. It depends on the size of the collection and the amount of time you have available to catalogue it. Think of an archive catalogue arrangement like an upside-down pyramid. As you go down each level, you get a more specific description, going from the entire collection right down to an individual item. This means that each part of the collection can be seen within its relationship to the collection as a whole. A collection is arranged in a hierarchy. This looks a bit like a family tree. Think about how you store the files on your computer, where you have folders within folders within folders. Archive catalogues are arranged in much the same way. You can see how there are multiple series in each collection, multiple files in each series, and so on. This means that researchers can break down the collection and focus on the small part of the collection they want to see without losing sight of the item's relationship to the rest of the collection. A hierarchy like this also means you know where to slot in the new materials you collect, and that you have a living archive that continues to grow and develop. Here we can see the descriptive levels mapped out against an example hierarchy. We have the Helen Smith collection. Let's say Helen Smith is a local historian who has donated her collection to you, and we'll give it the reference code HS. It has two series, local history research and collected photographs. The local history research includes research notes and newspaper cuttings. In the research notes are two notebooks, one from 1982 to 1984 and one from 1985 to 1988. Each level will have a reference code which links to a catalogue entry that researchers can look at. The whole collection is HS. The local history research is HS/1. The research notes are HS/1/1. And the second notebook is HS/1/1/2. The reference number is how you see the relationship. So HS1/1/2 is the second item in the first file in the first series of the Helen Smith collection. It's convention to do forward slashes to separate the reference numbers rather than dots or dashes. This is also a good time to do an appraisal of the collection and do some weeding. For example, if you have 7 copies of the same poster, you only really need to keep a couple, one for the archive and one in an exhibition or handling collection. Here is an example of archival arrangement. We have a number of types of document donated as part of the Stalham Boy Scouts Association archive. I'll shortly talk through an example of how these records could be arranged into an archive catalogue structure. If you wish to have an attempt yourself, pause this video and think about how you could create series, file, and item levels for these records. Here you can see an example of how you could catalogue the material from the exercise. Remember, there is no one right way of doing it. As long as you can justify how you've arranged your items and made it easy for researchers to search for what they need. I've called the whole collection Stalham Boy Scouts Association to reflect that everything in the collection was collected by or relates to the Stalham Boy Scouts Association. Next, we have the series. I've arranged the series by the particular functions that the material can be separated into. So we have financial records, minutes, correspondence, publicity, recruitment, events, and logbooks. Next, we have the files and the items. Please note you can go straight from series level to item level if there are only individual items within a series. For example, 2 account books rather than a whole file of documents. I've put the account books into the financial series as that's the function they relate to, and they are numbered in chronological order. Under minutes, I noted we have minutes of committee meetings and minutes of AGMs, so it's best to keep those as separate files as they relate to different types of meeting. So there's an extra layer under committee meetings to record the individual minute books at item level, where I have again numbered each set of minutes chronologically. I've put the dated correspondence in the correspondence section. I've numbered it, so if any further files of correspondence are added to the collection, they can be added in number order. I've put the newspaper cuttings under publicity, again so that more files of newspaper cuttings can be added later if necessary. I've put the recruitment posters and recruitment photographs under the recruitment series. If any more types of recruitment material come in, we could then create extra files. For example, we could create a file for radio recordings of recruitment advertisements. Or, if more sets of posters come in, we could go a layer down and list them as items by date order. Next, we have a series for events, where we can put the file of photographs of the summer camp. Individual photographs could be catalogued to an item level, but you don't have to. The photographs of the summer camp could also go in a number of places, and we might need more context to know where they should fit in. Were they taken for the purpose of publicity or for recruitment purposes? If so, we could take them out of the events series and put them in the publicity or recruitment series. Then we have logbooks, which we can again list in number order. Remember that some material may have sensitive information, for example, the personal information in the recruitment photographs and the logbooks. Depending on the situation with your donor permissions, you might either close these for a period and note this on the catalogue entry, or you could digitize each item and make access copies of the parts of the item without personal information. Be particularly careful with photographs of children, especially if named. Restrict these while the subjects are still minors, i.e. under 18. Don't put these photographs online, but do keep them as part of the archive, as there is a data protection exception for doing so. Finally, there is an item that might not fit in with the collection. I've pulled out the photographs of another scout group, as these things aren't of the same provenance as the Stalham Boy Scouts Association, so they shouldn't necessarily be part of the same collection. You may decide to offer these to the North Walsham Scouts group, or return them to the donor, or dispose of them. So, to recap, it's a good idea to arrange your collection in a hierarchy. This helps you consider its provenance and original order. If these aren't possible, you can then work out the functions of the material held. You can move from the general description to a specific description. whilst also getting a sense of an individual item's context within the collection. A hierarchy like this also means you know where to slot in new materials you collect, and allows you to have a living archive that continues to grow and develop.
Catalogues are populated with information which is entered through specific fields. This could be in the form of a database or spreadsheet. Although there are potentially many different fields that archive catalogues use, you only need 6 compulsory fields to make your catalogues comply with archive standards. Here we are using the advanced catalogue form template created for this project to show the 6 compulsory fields. These are level. This is the level of description being referred to. This could be collection, series, file, or item. Here we are using the collection level template, and we'll show you the series, file, or item template shortly. Then there's reference. This is a reference that reflects each level at which the record is catalogued. For example, HS would be a collection reference, then each number after a / represents a series, a file, and an item. For example, HS/1/1/2. Title. This is the name of the record, taken either from the record itself or assigned by the cataloguer. It should be short but meaningful. Creator. The creator is the person or organisation that created the item. Dates. This is the date or estimated date when the record was created. It does not mean the period the item covers. For example, research notes on a village in the 17th century would still be dated from the year the notes were written, so you would enter 1987, not the 17th century. Extent. This field describes how much physical or digital material there is in terms of size. For example, 1 box, 2 folders, 37 photographs, or a 4.3 megabyte file. Although not compulsory, it's also useful to have a description field. A good description helps the researcher decide whether the record is going to be useful for their research. It should be a short piece of text, 2 to 3 sentences long, that describes the content and significance of the record. Use neutral language and avoid words like interesting or important. You can also use the description field to give details of covering dates. For example, that the research notes talk about the village in the 17th century. The description field is also a good place to record the collection's provenance and original order, if this is known, or otherwise how the collection has been arranged. In the collection level entry, you can also add the collection's accession number. This is the number you give the collection to log it once it's come into your custody. Here you can see the series, file, or item level form, so you can add in the item reference. As we talked about earlier, for example, HS/1/1/2. You can also add in the level, series, file, or item. There are other fields which you can add in to flesh out the catalogue entry and give more ways of locating it. Original or copy. Here you can specify whether the item is an original document, a copy in the public domain, or in private hands. This might be useful to record if you want to use it in a display. Language. Use this field to record the language the record is in. If it's in English, you can choose to leave this field blank. Storage location. This is where the item is stored in the archive, such as cupboard 1, shelf 3. You don't want to be making this information available to the public for security reasons. Copyright. This is where you put copyright information, so whether it's in copyright, and if so, who owns the copyright if that's known. Access conditions. This will say whether the record is open and available to researchers or whether it is closed and the date it is due to be opened. Then there's indexing. An index lists various keywords that may be of interest to researchers. For example, people, places, companies, societies, political organisations. It allows a researcher to search across more than one collection to find useful information and creates another point of access alongside the catalogue. Indexes are really good at letting you cross-reference different records. Archive indexes are organised by the following criteria. Subjects, for what it's about. Places. Names of a person, company, organisation, etc., and their dates of existence, if known. You can choose whether to enter these in natural order, so first name then surname, or whether to put the surname first. Just be consistent. And genre, for what the item is. We have limited the index fields to 3 for each criteria. This is because of having lots of rows of index terms would make the catalogue difficult to export to another directory, which we'll talk about later. There are also public and private notes fields, which you can use to note anything else you may think is of interest. For example, what condition the document is currently in, or how it relates to other items in the collection. Public notes can be viewed by researchers accessing the catalogue. Use the private notes field for any information that should just be viewed by your group. Our cataloguing form template also has an option to add digital records. There are a number of further fields you can add in for digital records, such as the file name of both your preservation copy and that of your access copy. You can also add in where each copy is stored, for example, on your laptop or on an external hard drive or the cloud. This information should not be made available to the public. Just a note about the date field for digital descriptions. This is the date that the original item was made, not the date it was digitized, as this would be useless for researchers. The date of digitization can be added in the private notes field if you wish. If you don't want to use the advanced catalogue form we have shown you in the previous slides, you can also use our basic spreadsheet shown here, or create or adapt your own. Our basic spreadsheet includes columns with the compulsory fields, such as reference number, level, title, creator, dates, and extent, as well as all the others we have already talked about. This basic spreadsheet can be downloaded from the Community Archives toolkit. To record your catalogue in Excel, you just need each column to be titled one of the fields we've been over, and then fill out a row for each entry. Focusing here on the compulsory fields, the collection entry is first for the Helen Smith collection with the reference HS. You should enter the accession number for collection entries, but you won't need to fill this out for the lower levels if it applies to everything underneath. For the description, you can see we've given a summary of what the whole collection contains, so local history research, photographs, sketches, and newspaper cuttings concerning market lengthweight, with some background on the provenance, Helen Smith, who created it. You can see from the extent that this collection consists of 6 boxes in total. The first series of that collection is in the next row with the reference HS/1. We're getting more specific at this level, so we're now describing only the photographs of market lengthweight from the collection, and the extent shows that's 1 box worth of material. The last row contains the entry for the first file of the first series of the Helen Smith collection, so that has a reference HS/1/1. Even more specific, we're now talking about a file of photographs of a particular place, St Andrew's Church in Market Lengthweight, and this is 1 folder. Should you have the time to go further and describe individual photographs, you would add a new row, enter item for the level, give the first one the reference number HS/1/1/1, fill out the title, description, and dates, and record the extent as 1 photograph. The next item would then be reference number HS/1/1/2, as shown here, and so on. It's useful to create a style guide for your archive catalogue. This will help to standardise how your group records your catalogue information and ensure that new volunteers quickly pick up how you want catalogue entries to be structured. Decide in your groups how you would like to set out each piece of information, including how you will construct your references, titles, dates, extents, and so on. For example, you may wish to standardise how dates should and should not be recorded. Dates should be exact dates, for example, 23rd of May, 1978, the year, for example, 1959, a range of years, for example, 1909 to 1934, plus or minus 5 years around a date. For this, use C, which is short for circa, then the year. It could be a decade, for example, 1990s, a century, for example, 20th century, And if no date is given on the document but is estimated by the cataloguer, use ND with the date in square brackets. Dates should not be in a shorthand format. Draw up a document that sets out the required styles for each format. This can be kept for reference. The Norfolk Record Office catalogue templates have a drop-down menu of index terms for the categories of subject, what the record is about, and genre, what type of record it is. You can use these or add your own index terms if you can't find the ones you need. The name index term for people, organisations, societies, businesses, and so on, and the place index terms for towns, villages, streets, buildings, local areas, and so on, are obviously more unique to your own community, so you can make your own lists of these. Keep a list of your regularly used index terms alongside your catalogue style guide. We can provide guidance on adding new terms. Moving on to personal data and copyright, community archives may hold two types of personal data. The first is personal data that is part of a collection. For example, letters including correspondence addresses or photographs of living people. And the second is personal data that is collected in the course of running your group, such as donors' contact details on an accession form, oral history permission forms, or email addresses on a newsletter mailing list. Personal data may not necessarily be an issue with the material you collect, but is nevertheless important that you are aware of it. Personal data includes any information that could identify someone, such as a name, address, telephone number, or email address. Any information that could be combined to identify a person, for example, a job title or health history. Personal data laws only apply to people who are currently alive. You do not need to destroy or return archives that contain personal data, but records containing personal data should have a closure period unless you have explicit written permission from the person concerned to open them. Remember, this will not always be the same person as the donor of the archive. The National Archives advises a closure period that assumes a lifetime of 100 years, but this can be graduated down from the age or assumed age of the individual in the record. For example, you have a 20-year-old photograph of a named person who is about 70 years old, meaning if still alive, they would be about 90 years old currently. This may therefore have to be closed to the public for a further 10 years. If you make sensitive material available, this could cause damage or distress to the subject of a record. Take professional advice or post on the Norfolk Archives Network forum if you're unsure. Copyright ownership affects how collections can be used. If you can, transfer the copyright from the item donor to the community archive when you first take in an item or collection. This needs to be written, not just verbal. This means you won't need to ask the donor for permission if researchers want to copy items or use them in publications, although checking with the donor out of courtesy is always a good idea. Sometimes the donor will not hold the original copyright of a record, as it may be a published item or created by someone else prior to the donor taking custody of it. In these situations, point researchers in the direction of the original creators or copyright holders for permission to copy or use the records. You should also be aware of the concept of fair dealing. This allows a researcher to get an insubstantial amount of a document or image copied for private research use without asking the copyright holder for permission. It does not apply for commercial use, such as publishing the document or image. An insubstantial amount could comprise a few paragraphs of a document or a section of a map or photograph, for example, as opposed to a whole book, photo, or map. For example, a researcher is using your collections to write a history of your village. They are able to quote a few lines from a written memoir, but in order to use 2 full pages and an illustration from it in their final publication, they must seek the author's permission first. To recap filling out a catalogue entry, here we are carrying on from the earlier example of Helen Smith's collection. We have here a notebook which we gave the reference code HS/1/1/2, and we write this at the top. It's an individual item, so we can fill in the level as item. The title is taken directly from what is written on the notebook itself. If there is no title, you can make a descriptive title. The description says Notebook of Family and House History Research compiled by Helen Smith, 1948 to present, between 16th of October 1985 and 30th of February 1988. Includes original material plus transcripts and photocopies of originals relating to the life and house of Helen's great-grandparents Geoffrey and Mary Smith between 1900 and 1940. The dates are of the item's use itself, not the dates covered in the research, which you can put in the description instead. The extent is 1 volume. It's an original document, even though it contains photocopies of other sources. It's not a copy that we have created ourselves. It's in English. We have the storage location and who owns the copyright, in this case Helen Smith, and it's open access for researchers. We've added in some index terms too. The subjects covered, households, family life and agriculture, places and names, which are unique to each collection, and genre, family records, notebooks and personal correspondence. We have 2 notes fields, public, which can be seen by the researcher, and private, which can only be seen by members of the group. In the public notes field, we have some comments about the condition, torn pages and loose cover. Here is an example of cataloguing an archive item. I've already given this letter a reference number, HN/2/5/4. This shows it is from the fictional Horatio Nelson archive. As a title, we could look for clues in the item. It is written by Horatio Nelson to William Herring Esquire, so we could give the title as Letter from Horatio Nelson to William Herring Esquire. For its level of description, we can see that it's an individual item, so you would say it is at item level. Extent would be similar, as we could say it was 1 letter. The date of creation may be stated on the items, particularly with correspondence. Here we can see the letter was written on September 18th, 1797. The creator is also given by the item. Here we know that the writer of the letter is Horatio Nelson. For a description, you could write something like, Letter from Horatio Nelson to William Herring, apologising for a delay in responding to the latter's letter about the receipt of a Spanish Rear Admiral's sword. Nelson also acknowledges he has been awarded the honour of freedom of the city of Norwich by the Corporation of Norwich. For index terms, we could use Navy, weaponry and civic honours as subjects, Horatio Nelson, William Herring and Corporation of Norwich as names, and Norwich and Norfolk as places, and correspondence as the genre. Once you have a catalogue, the next step is to get it out there so that people can see what you've got. There are a number of ways you can do this. The National Archives catalogue called Discovery has a feature called Manage Your Collections, through which you can upload your catalogue and get worldwide exposure to your collection. Archives Hub is a similar directory of archives which holds the catalogues of over 350 institutions across the UK. You could also simply make a public version of your spreadsheet catalogue available to download from your website or send it in an email to an inquirer. The Community Archives Heritage Group showcases the existence and work of community archive groups, and by adding your group's contact details, researchers can contact you for the access copy of your catalogue. This is a checklist of what we've covered. Arrangement, which allows you to know what you have and how the collection is structured. Provenance and original order, the key principles that help you create your catalogue arrangement. Provenance is the history and background of the collection, and original order is how it was originally arranged. If there is no obvious provenance or original order, you can arrange the collection by subject, so what topics it contains, or function, what type of work the collection was used for example, financial records or publicity records. Collection levels. These are different tiers of description within a catalogue that go from a general overview of the collection to an in-depth description of a single item. This allows the collection to be arranged into a hierarchy catalogue structure, which tells a researcher where an item fits in within a collection. Each entry in a catalogue has a number of information fields that can be filled in. There are 6 compulsory ones, but there are others you can use if you choose to. We also talked about personal data and copyright and what these mean for access to items within a collection. Once you've worked through these points, you're ready to catalogue your collection. Thank you very much for watching. There is an in-depth reference section on cataloguing on our Community Archives Toolkit. You can find this via the Norfolk Record Office website. Take a look at the Norfolk Archives Network forum to connect with other community archive groups. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us via the forum. We have a short feedback survey and a link beneath this video. This is really helpful for us to pass information on to the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes. If you could please click on the link and fill it out, it would be much appreciated. Thank you again for watching.